Okay. Before we begin, I just want to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you today from the traditional territories of the Lekwungen peoples, today known as the Esquimalt and Songhees nations. I extend my appreciation for the opportunity to live and learn on this territory. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on what time zone you are in. My name is Kim Cobb. I'm a teacher at Selkirk Montessori in Victoria, BC, and I'm also on the board of directors with Young Citzens. I'm going to introduce to you a young man who I was fortunate enough to teach and who has a really special bond with Monique. His name is Sah Sadu, and he is a student that Monique featured in her book, Speaking Our Truth, A Journey for Reconciliation. So I'm going to pass it to Sahaj now.
Hi guys, my name is Sah Sadu, and I'm a grade 10 student at Mount Doug High School in Victoria. I'm here today to introduce you to someone very special to me. Her name is Monique Gray Smith. Monique is an award-winning, best-selling author and sought-after consultant. She's a mixed heritage woman of Cree, Lakota, and Scottish ancestry, as well as a proud mom of twins. Monique's first novel was Tilly, a story of hope and resilience, which won the 2014 Burt Award for First Nation, Métis, and Inuit literature. Our class had read Tilly when I was in 6th grade at Selkirk Montessori School. I was fortunate enough to be able to meet Monique in person when she came to discuss her book with us. This was my first interaction with Monique. I remember asking tons of questions, and she just constantly telling me to wait my turn and let others speak. After our discussion had finished, I remember Monique smiling at me and telling me, never stop asking questions, never lose your curiosity. I remember that to this day and haven't let my curiosity stop. Later that summer, Monique had contacted my mom and asked if I would be interested in being interviewed for her next book, Speaking Our Truth. Without a doubt in my mind, I said yes. Now, I would love for Monique to share some of her wealth of knowledge with you all today. Thank you.
No, I'm just so touched. Thank you, Sahaj.
Thank you, Sahaj. Monique, before we begin with questions, I want to thank you again for being here today. I love hearing you speak. I take every opportunity there is. Do you have anything that you would like to say before the students start to ask you questions?
I would just like to take a moment to honor those whose traditional territory I live on, where I woke up this morning, where, when I look out my window, there's all kinds of shades of green and the flowers are coming up. And I live on the shared territory of the Lekwungen speaking and the Wasanich people, known as Victoria, British Columbia. And probably one of the greatest gifts I have living here, well, two would be: one, all of the books I've written have been on these territories, and two, raising my children here. I'm incredibly grateful to the stewards and really invite each of you every morning to pause and to offer gratitude to whoever's land your schools are on, your homes are on, even just for a moment. It has a beautiful ripple effect.
Thank you, Monique. Our first question today is coming from Lumsden, Saskatchewan, Ecole Lumsden Elementary. If you'd like to unmute yourself.
Hello, my name is Ayla. Here is my question. Your book, When We Are Kind, celebrates simple acts of everyday kindness and encourages children to initiate and receive acts of kindness in their lives. Can you share an event that demonstrated for you the power of kindness? What words of advice do you have for us kids?
Thank you, Ayla. About maybe 3 weeks ago, I got a text from my friend Richard. His name's Richard Van Camp, and some of you might know him because of the books he writes, or maybe he's even visited one of your classes. And he texted me and says, I know you've been going through a hard time. I want to send you something. And so he called me right after that, as soon as he saw I had seen the text message. And he said, I just did a class visit and they gave me a $200 gift certificate for Massey Books. And I want to give it to you. Go shopping, he said. And, that was a beautiful gift. I bought some books that I've been wanting to read, like Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Boulley. If you're looking for a good book, wow. But also I spent probably the other $140 buying gifts for other people. So that's the ripple of kindness, right? It just keeps going. So that's probably the most recent act. And what I would share is to be kind and allow yourself to receive kindness. Because sometimes it's not always easy to receive those acts of kindness. We're like, no, it's okay, it's okay. But when we do that, we actually take away the opportunity from somebody to feel really good. Because some of the science of kindness in our brain is that when we are kind, when we see kindness, or when we receive kindness, in our brain, cortisol, which is the stress hormone, goes down, and two hormones called oxytocin and dopamine go up. Those are our feel-good chemicals. So that's why kindness is so important, because it feels good. And we need right now a lot of medicine to feel good. So thank you for your question, Ayla.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Blessed Sacrament, Vancouver, BC.
What are the 4 blankets of resilience? And can you briefly teach us about them, please?
For sure. Thank you. The 4 blankets of resilience are a cultural model I developed about resilience, which is really the ability to bounce back. And I have been doing a lot of research around, kind of the Western way, the academic way of looking at resilience. But I was wondering, in our communities, how are we resilient? Because when you look at all the legislations in both Canada and the United States and other countries in the world in regards to the Indigenous population, we're actually not supposed to be here anymore. And yet, not only in Canada are we still here, but we're the fastest growing times 3. So we are resilient. We have this ability to keep bouncing back. And so I put them in blankets. The first blanket of being able to be resilient is having a strong sense of self, knowing who I am, where do I come from, where do my ancestors come from, what is the language or languages that run through my blood, what's the land and the water and the stars and the medicines from the land that I'm connected to. It's really about identity. And when you think back to the closing ceremonies for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the chair, Marie Sinclair, said 7 generations of students left residential schools not being able to answer, who am I? Where am I from? Why am I here? And where am I going? And so that's why this first blanket of identity is really important. The second blanket is our sense of family. And that for sure can be our family that we're related to. But sometimes our family is people who we love and who love us. Some of our friends, some of the parents or the aunties or uncles of our friends, some of our teachers, the adults in your classrooms can be like family. They might be like aunties or uncles or grandparents. And then the third blanket is our sense of community. And again, in your classes, you may have a sense of community. In your school, you may have a sense of community. Where you live, you may have a sense of community. And it's about feeling like you belong somewhere. And every human being walking this planet has an innate, it's within us, this need to feel like we belong somewhere. And sometimes that's why we see when people don't feel like they belong, they look sometimes places that are unhealthy or unsafe to feel like they belong, because we need to feel it. So our sense of community is really important. And then the fourth blanket that really weaves them together is culture and language. And so for me, as an Ihiho, my mom comes from Papikassis First Nation in the Qu'Appelle Valley of Saskatchewan, and my dad is both Lakota and Scottish, that the culture weaves in lots of ways and can be like the roots for being able to thrive, being able to use the gifts that we've been blessed with. And when I say gifts, it's like, what unique contributions can I make? So that's a very quick summary of the 4 blankets of resilience. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Selkirk Montessori Victoria, Cormorant class.
Hi, my name is Lucy, and my question is, we have learned about how the trauma of residential school experience by parents and grandparents can be passed down through genetics to their children and so on. How can this be stopped? And you have kids, how have you tried to make sure that this doesn't happen to them?
Thank you. I think as adults and as young teens, we have a responsibility for our own healing, to make sure that we are as well as possible. And that means taking care of ourselves, but it also means like nourishing our spirit. So for me, like going for a walk in this park, I live really close to Culpacalls, is nourishing my spirit. Taking care of myself is drinking water. And seeing a counselor or seeing an elder or a therapist to talk about the pain in my heart, that's part of the healing. And for me, a big part of my healing has been my sobriety. I started to drink alcohol when I was 11 and drank very heavily till I was 22. And for me, I know that my sobriety literally saved my life, but continues to. Next Monday, it'll be 30 years that I've been sober. I've been sober longer than some of the teachers and adults in your classrooms. And so that's the biggest decision I think I've made that has changed the trajectory for me, for my family, and especially for my kids and my nieces. Yeah, thank you for your question.
Thank you. Robert Adams Middle School in Holliston, Massachusetts, USA. Let's see. I don't know if they made it on. They may not have. I will ask
Okay.
the question if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
In school, we focus so much on the awful things, the truth of what has happened to Indigenous people. Can you tell us about the resiliency of Indigenous people and the positive impacts that Indigenous people today are having on Canada and the world?
Yeah, I think that, we're having positive impacts every single place in the world as Indigenous people, here in Canada for sure, in the United States, but everywhere. The interesting thing is that the media doesn't always want to show that. The media still wants to show what isn't working, or the stereotypes or the myths. And so I think that's an act of allyship, is for some of you as young people to be curious about, just like this question, where's the thriving? The thriving is everywhere. We have more Indigenous students in post-secondary than ever before. More Indigenous students graduating with PhDs and doctoral degrees than ever before. We have here in Victoria the very first Indigenous language revitalization program starting in the fall. That's massive. So the thriving is everywhere. It's what we choose to look at and what we choose to see that influences then our worldview of who we are. There's a beautiful new picture book that is just actually being launched today in the United States by Tracy Sorrell McClellan called We Are Still Here. So yes, it's relevant for children, but it's relevant for everyone because it shows we are still here. And she outlines all the ways we're here. So thank you for that question.
Thank you. I'm also going to read Rossburn Elementary in Manitoba. With COVID, some of the schools have ended up missing breaks or going online. If you were part of a time capsule, what would you put in for the future citizens to see?
I would put in photographs of how beautiful the land is, how beautiful and clean the majority of our waterways are, how beautiful and clean the majority of our air is through photographs. When you can take a picture and you can see a mountain with snow peak on it hundreds of miles away, shows us how clear the air is. So I would put all those photographs in. And I would also put in seeds, especially of our 4 sacred medicines of tobacco, sage, sweetgrass, and cedar. And not tobacco as in, like you think, so you see some people smoking, not that kind of tobacco, or traditional tobacco. This was actually just sent to me from the Vancouver School Board. So I'll pull it out so you can see a little bit of how this tobacco looks very different. It's like quite flaky and big leaves. And this tobacco is often offered when we're asking somebody to do something for us. It's given in ceremonies, it's used in ceremony, all 4 of those medicines. So I would include those medicines and seeds for those medicines and teachings around those medicines as well in that time capsule. That's a really interesting question. Thank you.
Thank you. Strathcona Elementary, Vancouver, BC.
Right. Good morning.
Hi, my name is Lilia. Our school has a large First Nation population. How can we be allies?
Thank you, Lilia. There's so many ways to be allies. One is to begin to understand some of the teachings of the traditional land you're on. You're on shared territory of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh, who have similar teachings, but knowing what are some of the important teachings of those nations in regards to how they care for the land, in regards to what it might be ceremonies for the 4 seasons, in regards to, what might happen when the moon is full. So those would be some pieces to just begin to understand in a bigger way. The other piece is I'd encourage you to review the 94 calls to action. And to, there's a great YouTube channel that young people have spoken to each one of the calls to action in regards to how young people can be active in that call to action. And I invite you to choose one of those calls to action to be kind of like your beacon for the year, something that you'll work on, that you'll think about, that will be part of your decision making throughout the year. And to, honor and invite, when it's safe again, those members from the communities that I spoke about to come in. Because a big part of allyship isn't always doing for, it's having a strong understanding for yourself. And one of those pieces is using our 2 ears and our 1 mouth, right? So to take up less space and make more space for other perspectives, other worldviews, other lived experiences, other stories to be present. One other thing is to invite your librarian to do an audit, to look at the books in your library. If you have a large student population who are from the nations or are Indigenous from other nations, how many books in your library are written by Indigenous authors? So that's one piece. When, if I was to walk in your school, would I know whose territory I'm on? Is there an honoring at the entrance to your school or schools? What's on the walls? Right? And we use this term white supremacist, and I don't mean it like on that far end of the pendulum, but in regards to school, whose ideas are we fostering? Whose knowledges are we fostering? Whose books are we fostering? Whose stories? Whose music? Whose teachings? Whose academia? All of those pieces can uphold or not uphold somebody's dignity. So those are just a few ways to know sometimes, in your personal life, I think this is something to think about, is that, not all of the adults in your life grew up knowing Canada's full history. They may not still know Canada's full history. They may have a whole other perspective around Indigenous people that may not always uphold the dignity. So when you come home and at your dinner table, you're visiting with somebody in the car, and you're talking about what you're learning, if you get a little bit of pushback, just understand everybody comes to the conversation at different places. And your young, youthful generation is educating a lot of the adults right now. because they didn't learn what you're learning. You're the first generation learning this history in school in this way. So it makes even just that simple thing for you to be an ally, to have conversations. And there will be some adults in your life that it will not be safe to have these conversations. And you just need to know that. You just need to know that. You need to protect yourself as well. And that's a big part of being an ally, right? Is being out there, but you also have to care for yourself. So thank you for that really important question.
Thank you. Guardian Angels Elementary in Stittsville, Ontario.
Hi, my class is online today, so no one is able to ask, so I'm going to ask for them. They're grade 6 students, and a question we'd like to know is, what can students do to actively participate in reconciliation so that we can make a difference?
Thank you. I'd go back again to those 94 calls to action and choose one of them as your work for the year. I'd also invite you to one, write a letter to the Prime Minister and to Minister Carolyn Bennett about the communities who still don't have water. That we have, the Globe and Mail has said over 30 communities, it's over 120 communities we actually have in our country that don't have drinking water. So that's one piece that's really, and in Ontario, there's a large number of those communities, right? So that's a really active way to foster reconciliation and to be, involved. The other is to look at what First Nations Caring Society is doing under the guidance of Dr. Cindy Blackstock. They've always got different activities to do, have a heart day, so much that she promotes. Yeah. So thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Now, I'm not sure if I'm going to say this correctly, so please, please correct me. Nakalbun Elementary in Fort St. James, BC.
Hadi, Monique, we are grade 7 students from Nakalbun Elementary School in Fort St. James, BC. We want to know, what was your toughest time in life and how did you overcome it?
Ooh, that's a big one. Thank you. And by the way, I love Fort St. James. I was up there about a year and a half ago, and you live in one of the most beautiful places in our province. Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Oof, probably, see, I didn't think well, this is real. My tears and my emotions. Probably the hardest time is actually now. In November, my dad's cancer moved to his bones and his brain. And my sister and I cared for him at home until early January, when we had to admit him to hospice because we just couldn't care for him at home anymore with his needs. He passed away February 21st. And so these last months have been really, really hard. But, I'm grateful where I live because, as I said earlier, I'm a block from this beautiful forest called Bacalls. And that's where I go almost every single day, is into that forest by the cedar trees. And I cry. And, those trees, they absorb my tears. The soil absorbs my tears. They hear my rage sometimes, when you lose somebody you love. There's also anger. That's part of it also. So, I feel like I'm kind of in the midst of that hardest time. And it's real, right? Every one of us joining today has lost somebody we love, or an animal or a pet. It's a part of life. But when we have places we can go with people, my family, out on the land, on the water, that help to heal us, then we can get through the hard times. And I feel like I'm not through yet. I'm still in it, but I'm working my way through. So thank you for that question.
Let's see.
I wish I could give you a hug right now, Monique.
Yeah, me too.
Selkirk Montessori, the Sea Star class.
Hi, my name is Finna, and I'm a grade 6 student in Selkirk Montessori School. First, I'd just like to say I'm very sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
My question is, we all know you're an amazing author, so what tips and tricks or just any advice do you have for young writers out there?
The first thing I would say is pay attention, right? All around us, everywhere are stories. And listen to the stories adults tell in your life as well. Like, be curious about what are the stories about you as a child? What are the stories that teachers have about you? That, there are stories everywhere. And in some ways, they are a form of medicine. Sort of in the Western world, we think medicine is something you get from a shelf somewhere. But in our worldview, medicine is everywhere. It's our stories. It's sleep. It's the food we eat. It's being outside. It's love. It's kindness. So pay attention. One of the things I used to do when we were able to was I'd go to coffee shops and write. Because, in a coffee shop, there's all these people who come in who have characteristics that might fit into a character in a story or something they're wearing. I'm like, oh, yes, of course, that character would wear that kind of a hat. Or you overhear a conversation, you're like, oh. The other thing is I watch a lot of movies and I listen to a lot of books on my phone because there's every time, especially when I used to go to the movie, I used to love going to the movie by myself. It was like my favorite thing to do. And I would sit there and think, somebody sat at a desk for hours imagining all of this. And now I'm watching it on a screen. Wow. So when you need inspiration, watch something or listen to something. And remember that stories are everywhere. I also use my phone a lot to audio record because sometimes my fingers don't keep up when I'm writing. So I will audio record something, send it to myself via email. It translates to text, and then there's the first draft. So it helps. And it helps because you might have noticed, a bit of a storyteller. So that's the easy way for me to capture, one of the gifts that I have, and that's storytelling. So thank you for that question.
Thank you. Yeah. And our last question is coming to us from Tom Thompson in Burlington, Ontario.
Hi there. I'm having trouble with my video, but I'm hoping the audio is okay. Oh, there it goes. My students have just moved to virtual as well, but we are coming to you from the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. So we just wanted to start with that. And the question is from my student Claire in grade 6, and she asked, in your opinion, what is the most meaningful book you have written and why?
I think it's this one, My Heart Fills with Happiness. And this is the Nihiwean, the Korean English edition. This book came out in 2015. But in 2019, so like last school year, it was chosen as the TD Grade 1 book giveaway, which means that every child in Canada in Grade 1 received this book in either English and Cree or French and Cree, depending what the class is, and illustrated by the incredible Julie Flett. Your libraries will be full of her books. And she is Cree and Métis. And the reason why I think that's so important is because you think about 550,000 children got that book. One, how many children is that their only book that they've ever had that's just theirs? Maybe there's lots of books in the house, but they've been for older siblings. Maybe they don't have any books in their house, and it's their first book. How many of those children have never brought a book home in an Indigenous language? How many of those children have never brought a book home that has a little girl with brown skin on the cover? So that's why it's so important, is because we then begin to understand other people's lived realities. As well, in 2018, less than 1% of all the books for children that were created in Canada and the United States had our people in them. In 2019, it was 1.5%. And 27% of those books in 2019 had dinosaurs on the cover. So when we're looking at our common humanity and understanding each other and our lived experience so that we can have a more global society, we can have a stronger sense of each other and upholding each other's dignity, it isn't about the dinosaurs. It's about understanding each other. So that's why I think that's the most important book. Thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Monique, for this today. Do you have any final words of wisdom or a final message for the students and adults that are with us today?
I would say to take very special care of yourself. There will be lots of times in the world where others will attempt to control you or to make decisions for you. And lots of times the only thing we can control is our own selves and how we react. And when we are taking care of ourselves in the best way possible, then we can react in a good way. Sometimes we don't react, we then respond instead of react. So take extra special care of yourself, because there's nobody walking this planet right now who has the same set of gifts as you. Those gifts are your unique way to make a difference in the world. That's why you've come here, is to make a difference in the world. And there's nobody like you. So treat yourself. And I'm not talking about ego, but just that humility to know that you're special and to treat yourself that way. And, you know, I look forward to when our paths cross again, because they always do. Yeah, thank you, Kim.
Thank you, Monique. You were so gracious in accepting our invite to speak with the Young Global Citizens today, and your thoughtful words will have an impact on all of us that were here. We hope that you will accept the honorary title of Young Global Citizen and be part of our movement. Thank you.
For sure.
We have a tradition that at the end of an interview, all the schools will unmute themselves and say goodbye. So schools, kids, if you'd like to, please do so now.
Thank you very much.
Bye. 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 Bye.
Bye.
See you. And bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.